On this edition of the program, politics, presidents, music, internet, optimism, and 9/11 conspiracies? It's a big conversation with our new friend, Mr. Beat from YouTube. It's all coming up.
The following is brought to you by AB Puppy, Just Another Pilot, and Daily Tech News Show.
Hello and welcome everybody to the Politics program for Wednesday, September 25th. Good gravy. We are barreling into this election so fast. My name is Justin Robert Young, joining you from Austin, Texas, as always. While I was at the Democratic National Convention, which I wasn't there for long, I was walking through press row and I saw a friend of ours, Guy, otherwise known as I'm Really Important on Twitch. He is a liberal streamer who does a lot of really cool stuff. He is on there all the time. He's always been a really nice dude. I ran into him out in Amsterdam, actually. I'm always running into him at the funniest places. But he was doing a live stream with a group called Progressive Victory, and he was talking with two other people. And he called me over and he says, "Hey, you want to live stream?" And I'm like, "Well, geez, come on, bribe me to stick a microphone in my face and ask me my opinion." So of course, because I am a whore for adrenaline, I go and sit down on the set. And one of the people that I was talking to was Mr. Beat. Since then, I have enjoyed his content on YouTube. He is very popular there, over 1 million subscribers, and he was nice enough to come on the show right now. So let's go ahead and welcome him. Joining me now on the program is Matthew Beat. He is known as Mr. Beat on YouTube and somebody that I met at the DNC. Welcome to the show. Is it Matthew or Mr. or Matt?
Whatever. Most people online know me as Mr. Beat because that's my channel name, but it is my actual name. Yeah, Matt Beat. So, but you can call me whatever you want.
All right. Well, we will stick with Matt here. Your channel has really done very well for itself. It is over 1 million subscribers, and it is a mix of history and political commentary and parody songs. Like, give folks a sampling of what you do.
Okay, I'll start singing. No. Yeah, it's mostly a political history channel. Like when I was at the DNC, that's what I told everybody because my most popular videos deal with presidential history. I have biography videos about different presidents and songs about every president, but I also have geography and economics videos as well. It's I taught social studies, and so a lot of my early videos were just literally part of my curriculum that I was teaching in the classroom. So yeah.
Give me how does that evolution go? How do you go from being a social studies teacher to being a full-time YouTuber?
It's not something I ever anticipated, for sure. My first degree was in journalism, so I started out in broadcasting, TV and radio, but then I kind of fell out of love with it. And I did a couple other careers, and so later I went back to school to become a teacher, and my students were just some things they were not getting into, and it was boring for them, and so I was like, well, I have these skills I've learned over the years and with my journalism degree making videos, and also I was a musician, so I combined all those skills to try to make entertaining videos for my students about social studies, and then over the years after that, it turned into a side hustle because I started making money from it because actual people that were not my students were watching the videos, and that to this day I'm still amazed by it. But I've been full-time YouTuber since 2021 because during the pandemic I started making more money doing it than I was teaching in the classroom, which, teachers don't get paid that well, so I guess that's not a surprise.
Low bar to clear in our modern era, but still, it is an important one to clear nonetheless. So you were making these videos and then just sending, I guess, this is my lack of knowledge since I've been out of the education system for so long, certainly long enough that YouTube was not in play when I was in any kind of public school. But you would make a video and then just send it to them to begin a lesson, or would you play it in class? How does that work?
Both. I mostly in class. I just force my students to watch myself on the screen. Like, I just got you in person. Now I have to watch you on the screen. What the heck is up with that? But I think that the power of the medium, though, is like we would just read about these things in books, and like,
yeah,
I would find I don't know, like I had silly little jingles I made to help them remember stuff, and really bad jokes, and lots of memes, and I still carry that tradition over. Like I try to keep up with what the youth of this country is tuned into, and I incorporate that in my videos. Because I'm like, my whole mantra is like trick them into learning history. Do whatever I can to, because they click on it, and a lot of times realizing they're going to be you're about to learn something, you don't even know it. I think that's pretty cool. You know,
that is something. The rise of infotainment in our modern ecosystem is something that is fascinating, because there really is a tremendous hunger to learn something, and you know, even with this show, while you know the analysis is what it is, the one thing that I always really feel like I want people to take away from is, and I tell people, all of my takes are open source. Hopefully I say something that is smart enough and that comes with enough of a backing that you feel comfortable repeating it as if it were your own opinion. But I do think that from your perspective, it is a byproduct of this thirst to just kind of understand things in a world where there's so much information swirling around us.
Yeah, and it really thrives on YouTube in particular, because you just don't get it as much in traditional media. Traditional media seems to be more about just sensationalism these days, which is kind of sad. So a lot of times people are getting like the actual educational stuff on YouTube, which is crazy to say.
Yeah.
Because, you know, we remember the early years of YouTube where it was, you know, cat videos and accidents. Or, I don't know.
Yeah. I don't know when the dividing line was with YouTube, but at a certain point it was it was impossible to define it by one type of video. You know, I think that for people that were professional in it, there's certainly chasing the algorithm and finding out what rewards it. Do you want to do shorter videos? Do you want to do longer videos? But at a certain point, things just kind of became, you just fall into your own rabbit hole. And, you know, currently, as I started a YouTube channel for this podcast, because I have the studio here, I've spent a lot more time on the medium to just kind of understand where my content would or wouldn't fit. And it appears that my personal habits on YouTube are just hour-and-a-half long monologues about the most random stuff that you could possibly think of. And that exists almost entirely on YouTube. Like, I can't even think of where else you would get that aside from podcasts.
Yeah, there's something for everyone. Everyone, like, you talk to two different people and they're not getting recommended the same videos. And so it is cool to like collaborate like this, because you know that like your audience is probably not familiar with me, and vice versa, even though we have the same interests, which is crazy to think about. Like those guys that we met up with at the DNC, like Josiah and I'm Really Important.
Yep.
I honestly I was not that familiar with them before the meeting them at the DNC, but as it turns out, I had also I should say that my audience was not familiar with them, and now they're watching them. They're like, really, holy crap! Why didn't I know about these guys before? And it's like that every day. There's just too much content, I think, is really the main problem.
Yeah, you know, and even on platforms like YouTube that do have an algorithmic component to them, like you are getting recommended stuff on a regular basis. For largely where I've spent my career, which is podcasting, it is just a dark forest. Like there is no light. If you trip over something, it is almost by accident, or you have to be led there. You have to be given a map, and you have to really, really, really want to follow it to land there. Now, the good news is for podcasting is that once people get there, they're there for life, pretty much. Like it's going to take a lot to shake somebody if they find your content and they like you and you are delivering it to them regularly. But even with YouTube, like you pointed out, or I mean, Twitch also has an algorithmic problem. You know, it's always fascinating to say like, oh, a creator that I love, they fit exactly where I need to be. They were right here, right next to me, and I just didn't know it.
Yeah, and I just think that, I mean, not only is there a lot of content, there's a lot of high quality stuff. I think the best art in the world right now is on YouTube, on the very platform that we are on. And like in terms of art, I mean like cutting edge, people experimenting because they can, because you know, in Hollywood you can't experiment anymore. Mainstream record industry, because it's always lowest common denominator stuff. They're always playing it safe because they don't have budgets like they used to. So on YouTube nurtures the smaller creator just as much as the larger creator. So it's wonderful.
All right, well let's take a pivot here to talk about your fascination with history. You have had a lot of success talking about the office of the presidency and the people that have inhabited that office. Is that something that you have always been interested in, or did you find that is what the people were interested in?
No, I've always been interested in it. I was surprised to find that other people were interested in it. Apparently, over 1 million people are
really into it.
Yeah, because first and foremost, people have come to my channel because they're searching for these presidential stuff. People, I think, are fascinated uniquely in the United States about presidents because here there's at least this perception that anybody could be president. You know, no matter what your upbringing, no matter how wealthy you are growing up or how many connections you have. We kind of see that now with like Kamala Harris and Tim Walz as two people who were raised middle class. Like, I think that's something that is like, oh, wow. Like, and even J.D. Vance on the other side. J.D. Vance, like, especially coming from that part of the country. And so I think stories like that, you know, Abraham Lincoln's story of teaching himself how to read and completely self-educated to rise up as a prominent lawyer, then entering politics in Illinois. From him to Andrew Jackson, who was an orphan by the age of 13, lost both of his brothers in the American Revolution, and yet rose up to be president. So I think these are inspirational stories, and they're just easy to kind of get people into political history that way because, I don't know. Also, it helps that they're on money and on monuments all the time. You know, like people in the history community, there's all this. People talk trash. Historians like to talk trash about great man history, as they call it, where you're just like focusing on one person. And I know there are tremendous problems with that. I get it. However, in terms of how we learn often is through stories, and what easier way to tell a story than just to describe someone's really fascinating life, a biography. I mean, it's like history already has like a formula that you can just apply to anything. Yeah, it's great.
Yeah, while I totally understand criticism of making somebody the main character of history, right, and having all of their wants and whims be the dictating factor of why things happen. This is kind of just the nature of remembrance, right? It's like if you're in a car and you're going down the highway, the lights that you see behind you are going to be the ones that were burned the brightest, and eventually they are going to fade and fade and fade. So like the fun of history is going back and seeing, like Abraham Lincoln, we know as this paragon of virtue, this titanic figure in American history that obviously was a cataclysmic in everything that he wound up doing. To go back in history, the fun part is to understand, there was a human underneath all of that. There's a story. There were trade-offs. There were mistakes he made. There are things that age well, and there are things that don't age well, and that's the fun of putting the context to it.
Yeah, because we can connect to them. It's a great way to make history relevant because, technology is the main thing that has changed, but us as human beings has not changed for thousands, if not tens of thousands of years. We have the same emotions that drive every decision we make.
You know, I did I guess I'm still doing, I will eventually do a third season to it, but I did a podcast series called Raise the Dead, which was all about the 1960 election of Kennedy and Nixon, and specifically comparing it to 2016, because I thought that there were a lot of similarities between Kennedy's campaign in 60 and Trump's campaign in 2016, specifically as it resulted to the media, and also comparisons between Nixon and Hillary. But you know, the big reason why I was fascinated, I've always been fascinated with that election, is that nobody really talks about it. And you would think that it would be talked about more because two of the most famous presidents of our modern era ran against each other, but they were outshone by two other more cacophonous moments: Kennedy's assassination in '63, and then Nixon's Watergate resignation. When you look at stuff that you're putting videos together on, like, is there a responsibility from your point of view to just tell the best story possible, or where do you draw the boundaries of, if you're doing a video about a president, for example, like where do you want to draw your lines of how to tell the most compelling story?
Before the story is the lesson, so there has to be a lesson in my view, and the ultimate goal is to spread empathy around the world so that we all survive as a species. And so if you don't have that, then what's the point of learning the story? It's just a distraction. You might as well go watch the Matilda musical or something. That's what my daughter was watching last night, so it popped in my head. But you could watch anything then. So I always have that lesson in mind beforehand, and then the story comes later. And then, what do you keep in there? What do you leave out? That's the constant challenge, because you have to find that balance of, sometimes you do just need to keep the audience engaged so they don't click away. And so you have something that's super interesting but not necessarily relevant to the lesson. And then other times, you just kind of have to just give them what they need to hear, whether they want to hear it or not.
Yeah.
My whole rule of thumb when I make a video is, like, if I'm going on for a minute about with just facts, that's getting to be too long. Then I have to sidetrack to a dad joke or something, something to kind of get their attention back.
You know, the first time that I went to a kids movie with a child was my little brother that was, born years after, I was in my 20s when he was born. So when he's a kid, I was taking him to kids movies. And it was something that I realized very, very quickly, that kids movies are built the way that they are built because at their longest, they're going to go maybe about a minute and a half of trying to jam whatever they're going to call a plot into it before somebody either falls down or farts. There has to be a little bit of candy, and you could even see it while I was sitting there next to him, of he's interested, starts looking around, and then somebody better fall down or fart in the next 30 seconds, or else we are at risk of him spinning out of orbit.
I'll try that in my next video. I'll fall down or fart, because hey, it works for adults. We say this about kids, but our attention spans are just as bad, I think, these days. So I just think that it's never been more challenging to keep people's attention. And also, half the battle is getting them to click on the video to begin with.
Yeah.
So that's why I will say, I'll have a title for the Andrew Jackson video, for example, the most terrifying president in history, and then give him the red eyes, the thumbnail. Yeah. Because people are going to click on it. Yeah. Yeah, you're like, wait, why?
Why was he so terrifying?
Exactly.
I need to know. I need to know the answer. I'm always, I tend to be a technological optimist, and I'm a huge advocate for the power of good that technology has brought us. And it's always been one of those things, I think we're probably around the same age. that like when we were growing up, it was like, oh, well, cable television is rotting these children's brains, and MTV editing is making things so we can't focus on X, Y, or Z. And, you know, maybe mechanically that's true, but I've always bristled at the idea that, you know, that means that we are not learning, that we are not growing, that we are not, you know, creating a world. I think that anybody who has access to the kind of technology that we have had, and now for kids these days, they have access to more, they're going to react in a similar way. When you look at YouTube, and to bring it back to the example of the kid in the movie theater, you know, my little brother wasn't trying to be disrespectful, and I don't think that he necessarily had a particularly short attention span. It's just that he's a kid. Everything's new. You know,
Yeah.
I have a newborn daughter. Literally, the concept of breathing is something she has to know the concept of concepts before she can like have the concept of hands, right? And I think that with YouTube, really everything is still new to us. We're getting older and older, and we see a galaxy of entertainment, infotainment, everything that is right there at our fingertips. So it does take a little bit to cut through. This is your update brought to you by TakePoliticsSeriously.com. That's where you support the show. It's where you can get 2 bonus episodes each and every week. One on Monday morning for your first commute. Make it the first listen every single work week. And then, of course, Thursday, the late edition. That is when you get all the news that we don't have a chance to cover throughout the week. And it's coming fast and furious. I believe we had a big poll roundup on the last late edition, the big run of Siena poll, Marist poll, bunch of stuff, especially in the Rust Belt. And that all got to you super early with my breakdown of it. If you support us, TakePoliticsSeriously.com. Look, it matters quite a bit. Quite a bit. Spread the word. Let's get into some of the stories that we didn't have a chance to discuss while we were cutting it up with Mr. Beat. Vice President and Democratic nominee for President Kamala Harris told WPR's, there's Wisconsin Public Radio. Sorry, Night Attack fans, for WPR. WPR's Wisconsin Today on Monday that she supports ending the filibuster to restore Roe versus Wade and protect abortion rights nationally. Quote, Harris, I think we should eliminate the filibuster for Roe and get us to the point where 51 votes would be what we need to actually put back in law the protections for reproductive freedom and for the ability for every person and every woman to make decisions about their own body and not have their government tell them what to do. In 2022, as vice president, Harris said that she did support ending the filibuster to protect reproductive and voting rights. And as a candidate for president in 2019, when she was still a U.S. senator, she said that she would support ending the filibuster to pass the environmental legislation known as the Green New Deal. For those of you who are unaware, the filibuster is essentially the thing that makes sure you need 60 votes to pass something in the Senate. It has been a controversial roadblock, specifically with judges, that eventually led to it being abolished for Supreme Court appointments. That means you have gotten more ideologically driven candidates onto the court since then, because you don't have to pass 60. You only have to pass 51. You know, this is not a shock. Again, Harris has been on the record saying that she was for abolishing the filibuster on Roe before, but also you never really know with Kamala these days. You need to double check to see that things she said in the past are things that she still believes now. She does not support it for ending or for putting in the Green New Deal. That apparently is holding. What I don't know is why she doesn't lead with this. Because they currently, well, also, wait a minute, hold on. Well, they don't have the House. If they had the House and the Senate, the question would be, are you going to get rid of the filibuster right now? Now, they had the House, the Senate, and the presidency for the first 2 years of the Biden administration. And they had control of all three chambers before. There was an interregnum between Dobbs and the midterms that they did have control of all three chambers, and they didn't do it. So, I mean, this gets into the inherent problem with Kamala Harris distancing herself or trying to be new and exciting apart from the Biden administration that she has been a part of, is that it's hard because you have to answer questions like that. You got to figure out what the logic is. I would say if I were her now, I would lead with this in some of the stump speeches. Either you're going to cross this bridge or you're not. And I would say if you're going to cross it, don't do it quietly. Say, look, if we can hold the Senate and we can kick out Ted Cruz, hello, Colin Allred, that means we can have Roe back immediately. We can have Roe back January 2025. That's not the language that she uses. The language that she uses is, when something is on my desk, I'll sign it. And it just sounds very samey. That's my biggest critique with the Democrats and abortion, is that obviously you're going to win this issue. The question is how big you can win the issue by. And the language that we have heard around this topic just doesn't sound any different than it was before Dobbs. And I think that that's a mistake. Minnesota Governor Tim Walz is preparing for a debate with Senator J.D. Vance by holding a session in Minneapolis with Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg. He is playing Vance during these mock debates. Walz is also attending campaign fundraisers, and Buttigieg has been out on the media trail decrying Vance's faux populism. He has also done this during debate prep. Walz has been exchanging strong critiques with the fake Vance and will look to label him as an out-of-touch venture capitalist. Vance, of course, has been very pointed in calling Walz a serial liar, saying that he lied about his military service, his military rank, and the method by which Walz and his wife conceived their children. Walz said previously that it was IVF, where it was not IVF. Walz has raised significant cash over the last few weeks in New York and has emphasized the importance of the Electoral College, which we're going to get to in a second, at a climate-themed fundraiser. Pete Buttigieg, boy, you got to wonder what happens to Pete if Kamala loses, aside from him starting to run for president. I would believe that if Kamala Harris loses the election on a Tuesday, Pete Buttigieg lives in Des Moines, Iowa on a Wednesday, assuming that they're going to go back to the Iowa caucus, which who knows? Maybe they won't. He'll move to wherever, South Carolina, where the first votes are going to be. Or they're probably going to be New Hampshire. Because New Hampshire's like, look, we're not giving up on this. So you can go ahead and back it on up and move it back to where we need to be. Let's get into that Electoral College question. Republicans who have attempted to change Nebraska's electoral voting system to benefit Donald Trump has failed. This according to Republican Governor Jim Pillen, who supported switching Nebraska to a winner-take-all system. This happened after he said he would not call a special session because there was insufficient legislative support for the reform. Nebraska's current system allows for the following: 2 electoral college votes to the statewide winner, which will be Donald Trump, and 1 for each congressional district. That means that Kamala Harris will likely get 1 electoral college vote from Nebraska from their 2nd district, the most liberal in the state. That means that she can win the presidency only on the blue wall. This is very, very crucial. If she were denied that one thin electoral vote, that means she would not be able to get to 270 if she only won Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania. Senator Mike McDonnell opposed the switch, citing political risks, and hindered the effort despite support from Trump and Senator Lindsey Graham. I have a free political newsletter again. I don't know if you guys are on it, but head on over to Substack, search for politics, or go to freepoliticalnewsletter.com. That's another thing that you can do. Go to freepoliticalnewsletter.com and sign up, because I'm writing it 5 days a week again. Because we're in the end game now, and I've got more time on my hands now that I don't leave my house. But I wrote on Tuesday, for Tuesday's edition, the question of whether or not the Rust Belt and the Sun Belt are going to diverge. And part of this came up because the New York Times Siena poll, which is looked at as the gold standard in polling, released some polls in the Sun Belt that showed Donald Trump leading. And in some cases, leading fairly substantially, like in Arizona. It has also shown Kamala Harris leading in the Rust Belt. If they split and Nebraska stays how it is, which it looks like it is going to be, Kamala Harris is the president of the United States. Now, that will be a change from how the last two elections have gone. 2016 and 2020, where Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Arizona, and Georgia all voted together. Sun Belt, Rust Belt, living in harmony. It would take them splitting and meaning that there is not a fairly uniform shift in how the voters that are going to decide this election move for Kamala Harris to win, at least based on those polls. And we got more, man. I'm writing more. It's fun. I like it. freepoliticalnewsletter.com. That's it for our update. TakePoliticsSeriously.com is where you need to go if you want to support the show. But let's go ahead and get back to our conversation with Mr. Beat.
I always say that we are in the teenage phase of the internet.
I say that too. The adolescence, awkward adolescence of the internet. I say that all the time.
Great minds think alike. I love that.
We just became best friends. This is amazing.
Yeah, that's cool. Because I don't remember where I first thought about that, but like, it's so true, isn't it? That I think that most of the troubles we see with like how people are online, I think it starts with older folks, like people older than us that did not grow up with it. Like I notice, especially the conspiratorial stuff, because I used to be conspiracy minded when I was a young man. I think,
oh, really? What was your favorite conspiracy?
I was really into the JFK conspiracy, and I was even dabbled in 9/11 a little bit, but I also I was very religious growing up, and so I found that there were parallels to the fundamentalism of my childhood versus I just kind of I stepped away from my religion, and then what filled that void was these new clubs where oh yeah, we have secret knowledge that no one else has. But anyway, I grew out of it, but I still understand these folks so much. But what's crazy is today, conspiratorial folks are actually, the group is larger than it's ever been by far. Like there are tens of millions of people just in the United States, I think, that think like this. This explains the rise of Robert F. Kennedy, in my opinion, but also a lot of Trump fans too. And a lot of this is rooted in the fact that you have folks that have grown up, they're in their 30s and 40s, and they think they have the world figured out already. Yeah. So it's not like they're going to be changing their minds. And so when they go online, they're just actively seeking out people that agree with them or people that are saying what they want to hear. And I think that explains why so many of these conspiratorial-minded folks are in their 40s or older. They are, because I kind of I'm fascinated by these folks. I try to whenever someone is posting some of this underneath my videos, I'm I'm gonna check this person out, and I'm gonna see what they post, and and it's the same thing. It's I think that it's not even tied to one ideology. It's just Yeah, just general sense that, oh, the whole system is rigged. Everybody, like these few powerful people run everything, and it's up to us to like overthrow.
They are moving the pieces.
That's right, them.
Them.
But it's older, a lot of older people, and you'll see this even like the people that grow up with this. So I would say, especially younger millennials and younger, especially I see most of my students were Gen Z.
Yeah.
And they do not fall for these conspiracies as easily. They are skeptical, generally. I should say generally because there are obviously exceptions. And so this gives me hope. This is like, well, maybe we'll be out of this teenage phase of the internet by the time Gen Z are old folks, you know, because everybody, like when you grow up with it, you just kind of have to become more media literate. That's the way I view it. What do you think?
You know, the anchor point that I've thought of with the adolescent phase of the internet is that we grew up in a period where message boards were widespread enough that you could get a healthy audience. And I'll say a healthy audience is probably 24 people that at minimum that are there to keep it lively enough, which means, of course, there's 50 accounts because everybody has two. And you have to learn a few lessons, like when it's not beneficial for you to still be in the chat room, when it's not beneficial for you to still be on the message board, these immutable lessons. The worst person on the board has more time than you. You will never be able to beat them in a contest of facts and logic. You will never be able to be so mean to them that they will change their behavior. It will only beget more and more of this slop that you see in our social media now. And the people that I worry the most about are the people that are older than us that never got those lessons. They didn't learn them on wrestling e-feds like I did in the late 90s, like where, you know, there was just this, I had nothing to do but interact with people, and you have to learn these things in comment sections and Ain't It Cool News talkbacks and message boards throughout your youth that has really benefited me, because now, especially as a content creator, where people say horrifying things about me and my work all the time, and you know, you look at it and you're like, oh, you're the 70,000th version of a person who said something mean to me. And it's not really different. It's the same thing it was when nobody knew who the hell I was. Now you think you know who I am, but you're saying something mean. It probably means that you're lonely. And, you know, I know the one way that I can totally just derail my entire day is by spending any time going back and forth with you in a good faith manner, because there is no proselytizing the troll. Like you can make good content that leads people on a path, and maybe they civilize their own behavior, but you can never walk up to a troll and be like, let me show you kindness. No, that is a huge mistake. And I think it's about 90% of all Facebook comments by people that are over 50.
Yeah. Well, it also, you haven't even brought up the AI problem that especially is rampant on Facebook now with AI generated content. And presumably it looks like a lot of people, that most of them, again, are older than us, are falling for this stuff, thinking it's real. Are you concerned about AI with content, or you see a
I'm pro AI. I tend to think that it is an emergent technology like the internet itself. And so we can highlight, you know, the fact that the internet made child trafficking a lot easier, or we can highlight the fact that the internet created, a super sector of jobs that has powered the American economy. There are going to be a lot of negative things about AI, but also I do think that if you just look at it as a raw technology, it is something that makes content creation a lot quicker, a lot faster, and for when used, I think, appropriately, which I don't think that we've really even seen cultural adoption of, it's going to superpower a lot of the best elements of the internet, and it's going to make a lot of the best elements of the internet even better and more accessible. But at the same time, we also live in a world where right now, and just pivot to the election, what scares me about the election maybe scares, too hyperbolic of a word, but we are living in a world where either campaign and by extension, either community around it really even wants to acknowledge in any shared truth.
Yeah.
And so if the most famous thing in our culture is politics, and the most famous avatars within the most famous culture don't want to even acknowledge kind of shared truth between them, then we definitely live in a fragmented world where anything can kind of be sold to anyone. And whether it's an AI image of a child in Africa that builds a, statue of Jesus with Tootsie Rolls or whatever the thing that gets 1 million Facebook likes is, which is probably harmless, or something that is more sinister. The one thing that I do agree, back to our adolescence phase, what the vacuum that does need to be filled is something in the realm of a shared truth, which I do think our Pangea has spread far enough that right now doesn't really exist, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think I always bring this up, and some people call me naive, but I'm more positive like you are. I think that eventually these folks who are falling for lies, who are falling, basically con artists, or a lot of times are tricking them. I was in that position once, and I got out of it. And the reason why I got out of it primarily was because folks that I was following, particularly online, they were making predictions. And after a certain point, when you realize that the person you were following, none of their predictions are coming true.
Yes.
And even I always bring up, there's this dude named Peter Schiff, who he's an economist, but he's a very Austrian school, sound money. He wants us back on the gold standard type of guy.
Yeah.
I follow him closely. He was a big Ron Paul supporter. I was a big Ron Paul supporter back in 2008, 2007. And he predicted the recession. He predicted it, more or less. And because of this, he got some fame. But the problem was he kept predicting the next recession was going to happen any day now. And it never happened.
Yeah.
And that was one of those moments where I was like, oh, now my hope is that other people eventually, it could take a long time, because people are proud. They don't want to have their egos shattered and admit that they were wrong. Yeah, so it could be 10, 15, 20 years that some of these folks start to realize well, maybe those Trump NFTs were not worth anything at all. Or maybe it's going to be 20 years and they're going to try to resell them, and then people are going to laugh at them. That's when they're finally going to, maybe this all was a sham, I don't know.
Yeah, I think I've guest hosted on a technology podcast for years. I used to be on a technology network called Twit, and they the show hosted by Tom Merritt, which now is called Daily Tech News Show. I have for years railed against the idea of making politics the forefront of fact-checking online, because politics is an extraordinarily tricky place to do that. It is in many ways the art of hyperbole to say, Trump says at the debate, they're killing babies after birth. After birth, right? And then points to the former governor of Virginia. Now, did he say something close to that? That was a jumble of words. If you squint, you can do it. So it's where do you draw the line that you could put the words together? And on the Trump side, the bloodbath thing, where he's talking about an economic loss of a job, but it's spun as the idea that it's going to be January 6th times 1,000. So January 6,000 is going to happen if he doesn't win. It's as somebody who follows politics closely, some of that stuff is interesting to me because it is, it's persuasion. You're trying to, at the end of the day, just get people into a booth and hit a button. The line for truth is a little fuzzier. Whereas I think if you were to, on these social media platforms, focus on everything but politics. Like, let's just focus on, literally anything else. At least you could establish a baseline for fact checking that people would buy into, because as you know, it doesn't matter whether or not somebody screams and yells a bunch of things into your face. If you don't want to believe it or you don't trust the source, it's done. It's fruit of the poison tree, whether or not it has merit to it.
Yeah, sports is a good example to bring up. That when I look at elections, to me, because they're competitions and very like you throw away a lot of critical thinking and it's just pure tribalism, especially right before an election.
Oh yeah.
So like I think about, I'm a big football fan, and the Chiefs, they won yesterday against the Falcons. Yeah, it was really cool. But at the same time, what if like 90% of Falcons fans said no? The Chiefs didn't win. It was rigged. Yeah, and like they do. Granted, they do say.
Yeah, hey, look. That was a very, very generous non-call against Pitts in the end zone.
Oh, hey, there was another non-call too. Hey, I'm glad you're a football fan too. But no, yeah. Anyway, my point is that today, Falcons fans have accepted that their team lost, whereas you hear 4 years later, I'm still getting comments underneath my 2020 election video. Like, I'm talking
Trump
every
won.
day. People, it's Trump won. And they have, I've looked at this stuff quite a lot. And, there's so many opportunities for them to provide evidence, and it just isn't there. And to me, that is like, like what you're saying, that like this should not be political even. It should just be like, and same thing with the COVID-19 pandemic, where the people, like, it was politicized. Like they turned.
That was among the most depressing.
Yeah,
things
we should have been united against a virus, and yet we were turned on each other. Even with that, like, doesn't matter what it is, we can be turned against each other. It's so sad.
Well, the fact that it also happened during an election year, which is. Yeah. That was horrible, and you just knew it was going to be bad immediately as soon as it's like, oh, okay, well, now this is also the number one election issue, and we're going to wrap the economy into it. So, that's, I really, really, really think that the way out of it is the lattice work of trust that you build with communicators online and your friends online. And what I try to do is while you've pointed out, yes, more people are subscribed to a thing or follow a thing, have made some kind of meaningful action that say, I believe in, let's say, a demonstrably untrue conspiracy theory. Let's make up a fake one because I don't want to hear shit in the comments about it. But like, that the moon is made of green cheese, right? They probably subscribe, they take an action more to do it. I'm still unconvinced that we have a meaningfully larger group of people that believe that. The only difference is now that you're not going and talking to your high school buddies and either have it moderated out of a general conversation that they've heard about this conspiracy theory a million times. Don't bring it up again. Bring up something else just because they don't want to hear about it. The two things that are different are, number one, you can connect with people all around the world for it. And two, that everything's recorded. So now what would have been idle chit chat at a bar is now recorded forever and searchable. Yeah. And especially even more searchable now that we have AI tools that can, frack a lot of this data out of the old world internet. Just ask Mark Robinson and his postings on Nude Africa in North Carolina. But I don't know. I don't know if there's more people. I just know that we can find them more and that they are elevated more than they were before.
That's true. What you're saying is true as well, but I do firmly believe there are actually more people, and primarily because you have two presidential candidates that are really like, they thrive from that line of thinking that, they control things and I'm from the outside. I'm not part of the system. So trust me. And what's always crazy is that when you see these movements a lot of times that are they kind of activate more conspiratorial-minded people. It used to be like usually it's a very powerful person who was in the club, as George Carlin used to say, the big club of powerful people. So now I'm sounding conspiratorial, but it's true. You know, there's some certain people that have more power than others. Anyway, they're in that club, and they somehow get kicked out, or they're made fun of in that club. Trump used to be in the club. He got kicked out. So fine, I'm going to like start this whole and it really is an outsider movement, even though he's a billionaire. Same thing with RFK. He for years Democrat. I mean, he's freaking Robert Kennedy's son.
Bobby Kennedy's boy. Yeah.
Yes. Who Robert Kennedy is still considered one of the great American politicians, along with his brothers. And now he's like a laughingstock in the Democratic Party. So much where he left.
Well,
the
he was summarily destroyed, right?
Yeah.
Like some of the top talent in Democratic politics, and I would say specifically Liz Smith, who ran Pete Buttigieg's campaign. Her job every day, she woke up and her job was to heat ray Bobby Kennedy to diminish any influence he might have with Biden crossover voters, and now with Kamala Harris crossover voters. And so it's like, look, think whatever anybody wants to think about Bobby Kennedy, and boy, do you get something new to think about Bobby Kennedy every single week now, it appears. But it was not incorrect to say that there were people within the Democratic Party that wanted to run him down and to make people think bad about him.
Yeah, but I mean, my bigger point is that he had a sizable following. I mean, he was polling what was the highest he got? 15% almost.
He never really got to 15 because that would have been the threshold for the debate. But he would poll around 14, 13. Although that's not totally inconsistent with third party. Third party polling tends to be a lot more robust,
right?
Early in the cycle compared to later in the cycle. There was a Ross Perot poll before he dropped out the first time in 1992 that I believe had him up over both Clinton and George H.W. Bush.
Absolutely.
Now, of course, he winds up dropping out and then coming back in and still does as good as anybody's ever done. But the history tends to show that it's a lot bigger when it's a hypothetical. And then the closer we get to, as Reagan said, a time for choosing, the more people tend to herd to the two poles.
Because we only have two major parties that control everything. But like Trump, even though I think there's a reason why Kennedy meshed better with Trump than Harris. And that's because I think so many of Trump's supporters are in their own their very special bubble that is pretty unique historically in terms of like the reality is it's like a different timeline they're living on.
There's no shared truth. I mean, and that's it's something that it's kind of crazy to me. I did not expect it to get to this point where both candidates will say things about the other one, and there's not even really like an acknowledgement that the other thing happened.
And
right?
they agree on so many issues. Like Biden actually, I believe, was heavily influenced by Trumpism in terms of immigration policy and trade policy. Many of the tariffs that Trump put in place
never went away.
Never went away, exactly. And you even look at some of the rhetoric now of Harris, who she's clearly trying to attract Republican voters, specifically those never Trumper Republican voters. But I mean, that's the craziest thing is that the two major political parties actually have quite a bit in common policy-wise. Rhetoric is a whole nother thing.
Yeah.
But I just think about people, you can even tell, you can have Kamala Harris tell Trump supporters, this is my policy, and that policy could be verbatim from the Trump website as his policy. She's reading his policy to Trump supporters, and they'd be like, no, I don't want, no, that's ridiculous.
Ridiculous, yeah.
Yeah, like price controls is another example. Like, I know that's not literally price controls, but like some kind of curbing on prices that the Harris campaign has stressed, like, I want
initially, the anti-price gouging melange.
Exactly, and then Trump comes out with his own policy that's actually quite similar. He's trying to go after, like, it blows my mind how the parties are becoming more similar, and no one's talking about it because the rhetoric is still so divisive. That's what's
Well,
maybe that's a hot take. I don't know. Do you agree with
no,
that?
this is something that I've said on abortion on this show for years, especially post Dobbs, is that
Yeah.
when you actually look at opinion polling, America's not really all that far apart. Like we are far apart on people who believed that Roe was the solution and are mad that now that is gone. But in terms of just if you were to reboot the entire argument and everything was at zero and then you just opinion polled the nation, what you find is that there is a tremendous herding around like anywhere between 18 and 20 weeks. That's pretty much where it is, almost regardless of, I mean, obviously on the evangelical side, you get a little bit more hardcore, but even for people who identify as religious, it's usually about around there.
Yeah.
And yet we are, to just watch it, you would think that we were the furthest that we've ever been on this issue, that it is an unsolvable, immutable issue when, you know, I don't really think it is. I think that once people take the jerseys off and they stop screaming at each other, if you actually just, you know, say like, okay, but if you could solve it, what would you think? Usually the opinions aren't all that far apart.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's not just abortion. I mean, there's actually several issues where I would say there's overwhelming majority support in both of the political parties. For example, ending corporate welfare, I think, is my go-to. It's an issue that unifies both.
Especially now.
Yes. Term limits is something that I always hear from. Now, mostly Republican side these days, but there's plenty of Democrats who are also for term limits, not just Congress, but also even the Supreme Court.
Well, now, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, I don't know, like, if you go issue by issue, it is always a spectrum. That's what I always say when I made a video about why is there such thing as a left wing and a right wing.
Yeah.
And I always say it's very counterproductive to actually think in that binary, because it really should be per issue. Where are you on the spectrum on this one very specific issue? And when I say very specific, I mean, yeah, like if you're going to do abortion, okay, it's not whether or not you're pro-life or pro-choice. It's how many weeks?
Yeah.
Like, you know, do you think life begins? Well, we shouldn't say scientifically life beginning. We should say politically, like in terms of rights. When does a fetus first have rights, or a embryo first have rights? Whatever, like that should be the conversation. So, good point on that.
Yeah, and if you actually look at the policies of both candidates, even they're not that far apart. I mean, they are not as far apart as they've been in the past. Donald Trump has, to the point where he has alienated pro-life elements of the Republican Party.
Yeah.
Like he has moderated more on that than any Republican candidate in my lifetime. But again, this comes to the shared truth thing, where it's like, all right, so that's something that I have seen. Trump kind of doesn't want to talk about it. He talks about it a little bit. He hints about it more when he's in these high profile things, but he's not in the stump speeches, right? He's not doing it at the rallies. And then the Harris campaign's like, he wants to ban abortion federally, and also he's going to ban condoms, right?
Yeah.
And it's like there's no element of shared truth there. But you know, I wonder where we go, because I also think that everything comes in waves. Politics is by far the most popular and unifying thing in all of culture right now in our world. It's not movies, it's not music. We don't watch any of the same things anymore. We don't listen to the same things anymore. We don't read the same books, assuredly. We all watch politics. We all have an opinion on politics. That is the thing that everybody connects through. But I wonder if that's sustainable. And that's the one thing that I think I hope people remain interested in politics, because I'm going to keep making this content. But I also hope that it can be something where we can return to a little bit more of the model where everybody gets berserker insane 1 year out of the 4-year cycle, as opposed to where we have been in the last two, which is constantly overheating. Like we are as dialed in on year 4 as we are on year 1.
I would just say, though, that sure, everyone has an opinion on politics, but I would say a lot of people really just don't know what they're talking about with politics, because they really don't follow it that closely.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I mean, your audience is not. Your audience, I assume, are political junkies like myself.
I'm doing it for the sickos. Like
Yeah,
this is all. Yeah, this is all for the absolute lunatics.
We're the ones who are like constantly checking polls, like we were saying when I saw you in person. I was like, but I mean, the average normie is, it's I think especially after such a kind of a brutal 2020 election year, they just kind of, even if they previously were really into it, they got out and they're like, this is ruining my life. This is tearing up my family. And legit, like, that's why many families don't talk about politics anymore. And I think that has led to more people becoming more ignorant, actually, because just a great example of what we were just talking about, how most Americans probably don't even realize that the Democrats and Republicans have become more similar in policies in the last 4 years than dissimilar, in my view. So.
But this gets into, all right, so I'll end on this because I don't want to keep you for too long, but this is something that I find fascinating. We talk a lot in our culture about, hey, everybody go and vote. Everybody make sure you vote, register to vote, you should vote. How pathetic is it that we have such a low voting percentage in America? That is something that you hear. At the same time, if you want to up that percentage to something that is, away from the 40% or whatever, 40 and 30% up to the 60, 70, 80%, you're not doing it with a lot of high information voters. You are doing it with increasingly low information voters that are going to vote, which is also something that vexes usually the same people that lament how low our voting percentage is. So what would you prefer? A lower voting percentage that has paid more attention to the election, or a higher voting percentage that is essentially just voting based on how they like each candidate's nose?
That's a great question. The teacher in me wants to just immediately answer like, no, the more the merrier. We want everybody civically engaged, and it's okay if you don't know every last detail on every issue or policy. But yeah, part of me does get frustrated with, how many people clearly just are misinformed, and it's not their fault so much because it's hard to figure out what's true. And but I'm always about, I even had this question, I had an event a couple weeks ago, and somebody asked me, would you be for some kind of,
compulsory voting?
Well, no, they were talking about a test of some sort to vote, or like not even
a voting license,
where your vote was weighed heavier if you could prove that you were more informed. And I was like, once you get down that road, that leads to some pretty big discrimination. Yeah, so like voting is a right in my view, and so I always say, no matter what, even if despite the low information voters, you need to encourage as many. Just please, yes, vote, everyone. Yeah,
I tend to come down on the other side, not necessarily because I believe that there should be an informed electorate per se, but just because, and my world is in the persuasion world, right? The one thing that I want to foster, the lesson, as you pointed out, just to bring things full circle to me, is that American citizens should look at politicians like tools. They are people that are sent to Washington to do your bidding, which means you should know what you want out of them. And it also means that you should be disappointed in them if they don't do what you want. And you should feel free to vote them out. Vote them out in a primary, withhold your vote in a general election. Now, that tends to get really hard when we are in the environment that we are in right now, where things are so tribal and people yell at you and they scream at you and they say, if you want to vote for RFK or Jill Stein or Cornel West, that you are ruining it for either one of the two major candidates. My point has always been, you should have your own perspective on what you want out of these individuals, and you should vote or don't, and feel no persuasion that nobody has gone out and done their job. Because I'll tell you what, it's never been easier to get the word out, The money has never been higher. They have every advantage to convince you. And if they haven't done it, that's their fault, not yours.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people are making a statement by choosing not to vote. They're voting by not voting. You're voting when you don't, whether you realize it or not.
That, and also the only countries that have 90% voting rates are like dictatorships. So, Mr. Beat. Well, yeah, but they force them. They shove a sausage roll down their face and make them all go vote. Matt Beat, Mr. Beat to you on YouTube. Everybody go and follow him. This has been an amazing conversation. I hope to have you back on soon.
Yeah, we'll have to collaborate in the future. And I was so happy to run into you at the DNC. Great talking with you.
Absolutely. And that'll wrap it up for us today. Politics, written and hosted by me, Justin Robert Young, for Dog and Pony Show Audio in Austin, Texas. A big thank you to Mr. Beat. Head on over to his YouTube channel. Not that he needs my help, right? He's gigantic on YouTube. If you're watching us on YouTube, then, go give him a few dozen of us. Yeah, I'm sure he'll appreciate it. And if you're watching us from Mr. Beat's channel, welcome. Consider subscribing. If you'd like to email me, it is theyoungamerican@gmail.com. You can find clips of the show and other stuff. TikTok, Justin R. Young. Instagram, Justin R. Young. And X, Justin R. Young. Of course, YouTube, our home, is Politics. YouTube.com/@politics. And you can find the audio version of the show, PX3 Podcast, free political newsletters, where you get our 5-day-a-week free political newsletter, breaking down the news of the day and my insights on it. You can support us, paypal.me/payjury. Venmo is Justin-Young-20. Cash App is PX3 Cash. And you can send me anything you'd like in the mail. Post Office Box 153184, Austin, Texas 78715. Again, that is Post Office Box 153184, Austin, Texas 78715. You can always get our bonus content at TakePoliticsSeriously.com, and our $3 tier gets you 2 bonus episodes each and every week, covering all the news we miss on our free podcasting schedule. Our $10 tier gets you that, plus your name read at the end of the show, like these fine folks in the Titanic $10 tier, including Edwin, Invoke Gloria Young for King of the New World Order, Mike Edison, Jeremy, a dog named Checkers, Jeannie, Sarah Jeannie, Matthew, Phil, Dr. G, His Nerdiness Charles, Neil, Darren, Idris Arslanian, Berkeley, Stephen, Chad, Zombie Doc, Matt P, Chill, Sean, Song notes by David Potts, Nicholas, Sparky from Stevens, Florida, Fat Tony's PJs from New York, Michael, Devon, the CFP, the Borge B, Will, Gloria, my mom, Gray Zone Peapod, Jay, Marcus with a Q, DP4 Bongo, Sam, John, Niemeister, Chief Andy, Robert, Casey, Paul, Adam, Dr. Whiskey, Dustin, D-Laser, Nick, Joe, Middle-Aged Mike, Utah, Jimmy Montana, the Jen, Alo, D, Really, Craig, and Andrew. You want your name on the show? One place to do it, TakePoliticsSeriously.com. On Friday's edition of the show, the next in our free feed, I'm going to be taking a look at the tape of Tim Walz and J.D. Vance. We got one more debate for sure coming up, and it's going to be the undercard. Very, very weird that we have our final debate be a vice presidential debate, but it's been a weird election, so let's get into it. J.D. Vance has one debate on his resume. It was against Tim Ryan. And to be totally honest, I have no idea what Tim Walz's debate resume is. So we're all going to find out together on Friday. Debate prep. Also, Jeff Mauer's on the show, talking comedy. It's a really good one. Till next time, this is your old pal Justin Robert Young saying, some shows talk about politics, others talk about politics, and still more discuss politics. But this is the only show that dares discuss. Three.
Diamond Club hopes you have enjoyed this program.
Dog and Pony Show audio.